fellow students, and community, family, and friends. The JROTC Department from Marion High School welcomes you today as we remember the events that changed our world just 15 years ago. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please stand as Cadet First Sergeant Kaylee Smith sings the national anthem.
Stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. For the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the lands of the free and the home of the brave?
You may now be seated. On September 11th, 2001, life in the United States dramatically changed when at 8:46 in the morning, a commercial airliner crashed into the World Trade Center at 8:46 in New York City. The horror of that day did not become fully known until 3 more planes crashed into the second tower of the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, in a field in Pennsylvania. The loss of innocent citizens from these attacks totaled 2,996, and Americans learned a new term for terrorism, Al-Qaeda. Today we gather to remember the sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, mothers, and fathers who were killed on that tragic day. We come to remember the heroic sacrifices made by emergency first responders such as police, firemen, and emergency medical personnel. Today we honor and remember all whose lives were irrevocably changed that day. It has long been a practice to render honor to the death of a distinguished personnel by lowering our national colors to the position of half-staff on the flagpole. This custom serves as a reminder to all those who see the colors flying into this lowered position that persons of honor have perished. For those ladies and gentlemen seated, please stand now as we remember those who have perished on the attacks of 9/11 by lowering the flag to half-staff. Ladies and gentlemen, you may take your seat. It is our distinct pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Chief Jeff Williams of the Marion Fire Department. He is a 1996 Marion High School graduate. He graduated from the University of Ivy Tech in 2007 with an associate's degree in public safety specialty in fire science. He has been a member of the Marion Fire Department since 1999 and became Chief of the Fire Department in January of this year.
morning.
Good
and
morning.
Thank you for having me today. This year, of course, is the 15th anniversary of 9/11. After 15 years, a lot of people feel it's been long enough and we need to move on with our lives. As an American, a chief, a firefighter, and a father, I feel it's my duty and honor to remember the sacrifices made on that day and all the sacrifices made every day because of that day. I have two young children of myself. They were born post 9/11. One is 9, one is 4. It's not been easy to explain to them the sheer magnitude of that day. My kids have a short attention span and a lot of things just can't be said to them. But every year I've gone into more detail on why we must never forget. Our history lesson usually begins like this. It started out on an ordinary day, just like today, but a day that will forever be in history. On September 11, 2001, at 8:45 on a clear Tuesday morning, an American Airlines Boeing 767, loaded with 20,000 gallons of fuel, was hijacked by terrorists and crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. Of course, from then on, I talk about the planes, the towers, the Pentagon, and the fields near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. To my children, it's really not a tragic event that happened. I always try to consider that they weren't born yet, so they couldn't have felt the emotions that were so powerful that day. Those emotions were disbelief, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, and eventually depression. I myself had never felt that way ever, and I hope I never will again. 15 years have gone by Sunday, and people have moved on, but there are thousands of people who will never be able to. So I ask you to remember the sacrifices that were made that day. First, never forget the 244 innocent passengers of American Airlines Flight 11, United Airlines Flight 175, American Airlines Flight 77, and the United Airlines Flight 93. Never forget the 1,402 employees who died in Tower Number 1 and the 614 in Tower Number 2. Never forget the 343 New York firefighters, the 23 New York police officers, and the 37 Port Authority police officers. I myself will never forget an estimated 200 people who fell to their deaths from the burning towers, landing on the streets and the rooftops of adjacent buildings. Never forget the 125 civilians that lost their lives at the Pentagon, including 33 Navy sailors and 22 Army soldiers. Never forget the nearly 3,000 lives that were lost on September 11, 2001. They had friends and family members that did survive. Never forget the 1,609 people that lost their husbands or wives. Never forget the 3,051 children that lost their mom or their dad. Never forget the 1,717 families that never received any forensically identified physical remains of their family members. Only 58% of them did receive anything. Since 2001, there's been a reported 2,620 cases involving cancer-related illnesses. Over 1,490 9/11 rescue workers who responded to the scene in days and months after the attacks have died since then. 422,000 New Yorkers are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of 9/11. Never forget to honor our veterans and their families for the sacrifices they made in this ongoing war on terrorism. Never forget the 4,424 soldiers who have died in combat. Never forget the 31,952 soldiers wounded in action. I've repeated to you over and over, never forget, to honor the soldiers, the survivors, the friends, and the family members that can never forget and move on from September 11th. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion Fire Chief Williams, for sharing with us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand now as Cadet Miranda Holland comes to pray within her faith tradition for the family and friends who were lost in the attacks of 9/11.
O God, our hope and a refuge. In our distress we come quickly to you. Shock and horror of that tragic day have subsided, replaced now with an emptiness and a longing for innocence lost. We come remembering those who lost their lives in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. We are mindful of the sacrifice of public servants who demonstrated the greatest love of all by laying down their lives for their friends. We commit their souls to your eternal care and celebrate their gifts to a fallen humanity. We come remembering, we come in hope, not in ourselves, but in you. As foundations we once thought secure have been shaken, we are reminded of the illusion of security. In commemorating this tragedy, we give you thanks for your presence. In our time of need, we seek and worship you in spirit and in truth, our guide and our guardian. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. On behalf of the JRTC cadets and cadre, thank you for joining us today to remember.